Welcome everybody, faculty, staff, students, and invited guests. Today's Food Science, Food Industry Fridays, sponsored by the Department of Food Science and Nutrition. In our series this week, we have Dr. David Clifford, Director of Food Safety for Nestle USA. Our title for today's presentation is Risk Management, a Food Safety Leader's Perspective. We very much appreciate David for taking time to meet with us and to give us and share your insights from the food industry perspective. Nestle, being a global corporation, certainly brings a lot, as they say, to the table for the nourishment of the planet. So we're very grateful for your taking time to speak with us today. And we will have, as time allows, question and answer with David. Unless he invites questions during the presentation, we can hold them to the end, and I'm sure that we'll have time for that. Okay, David, the podium is yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. And to address the point there, there's a chat function within this, and Cindy and I spoke earlier this week. If folks have questions, certainly use that. And Cindy, I leave it to your discretion if it's something that's relevant at the position in kind of the presentation to interrupt and ask, then please do so. That won't be a problem. Or if it's something to wait till the end, then we can do it that way as well. So I leave it within your control to make the choice.
Okay.
I'm David Clifford. I'm a Director of Food Safety for Nestle USA. A little bit about myself. I've been with Nestle for 32 years now, and my tenure with Nestle is really divided into thirds. The first 10 years or so was very technical in nature. I was in the regional laboratory that we have, which is in Dublin, Ohio, and then a short stint overseas at our global R&D center in Lausanne, Switzerland. The next 10 years was operational quality in a couple of factories. One factory that was making ice cream products, and then another factory that was shared for Nestle, shared between dry beverage and confectionery and baking. And so that was a really interesting time, about 10 years there. And that was, again, operational factory quality management. And then the last bit of 10 years has been in various corporate roles, still in food safety. Right now, overseeing the food safety operations within Nestle USA, so very operationally focused, and a part of that time was at a zone level. So Nestle divides the world into zones. So Zone Americas, so I had responsibility for food safety systems and working with the various markets throughout Central South America, North America, and the Caribbean region. So really very interesting. And a great opportunity today for me to share thoughts on you on one of probably the important opportunity facing a lot of the food industry today, and that's about understanding risk and ensuring really absolute food safety for everybody. I'm a firm believer that all people have the right to safe, nutritious food, no matter where they are or who they are, and what food they can afford to purchase. So it's a very important subject matter, certainly for us. Make sure that, okay, did we change slides? Cool. I guess it's okay.
Yes.
I can see it on mine. I just kind of want to take a moment. Okay, so in any case, this is what we're going to cover today. I'm going to share some top level facts about Nestle to you, and that helps keep my corporate affairs folks happy. And then we'll get to the important subject of food safety risk concerns, and certainly as a food safety professional and in this global organization, how that's changed over the years and what we're really doing. So Nestle, what is it? Everybody's heard of Nestle. I'm sure it's a global organization. Our global sales in 2020 were around the 90 billion mark. That's billion with a B. And so that does make us the largest food company on the planet. It's a proud and humbling experience for me to be involved in this organization that touches so many folks. And not only because we're a very large company, but we're also a very old company and mature, and therefore we have a lot of experiences, good and bad experiences, that shape the way we do things every day. Nestle USA is an important part of the global community. Our sales are around 29, 30 billion out of this market, and we've got there you say 7 different operating companies across many states and 36,000 employees or so. So we do have the benefit of this impressive portfolio, and it is a privileged opportunity for us to be in about 97% of the households in the United States. And with that comes a big burden of trust. And I'll reference back to consumer trust a few times during this presentation, but when we talk about food safety, that trust aspect is first and foremost and paramount to what we're doing. Trust that consumers have in the brands, and also not only that, as an employee of Nestle, trust that the company has in employees to protect the consumer and do our jobs. So in this photo here, you see lots of fun people and the consumers that are enjoying our products, and included in here are folks that may have some different sensitivities. You see children, you see pets, you see elderly folks, and every day the food that we're making, the food that our peer companies are making are going to these folks every day, and we do need to accommodate the special needs and special sensitivities that they may have. The trust that folks have is a very precious aspect of what we do, and we do put a lot of effort in protecting that trust. Paying attention from farm to fork is really the only way to consider this, to maintain trust. And looking deeply into this value chain, that's what we refer to it, to maintain a high level of assurance of our products and meeting these food safety and quality standards. We realize that assurance is in the hands of people throughout our organization, and I suppose it's kind of easy for folks out in the world to look at Nestle as a giant machine that churns out a lot of food products and on the shelves in the grocery store. But in reality, there's really a lot that goes on into doing this. So, turning our attention to food safety, what are the food safety risks that are relevant today? And generally speaking, categorically, they've remained the same. But the landscape has certainly become a lot more complicated over the last 10, 15, 20 years, proportional to developments in our ability to use analysis to detect things at a much lower level, for even consumers having the ability to detect things. You may be aware, for example, in the gluten allergen kind of gluten area, these NEMA sensors, I believe they are, which is a handheld unit that consumers have in their possession for testing food to see if it's safe for them if they're celiac or have a gluten sensitivity. But with this comes a lot of perceived expertise in the world that we do have to navigate. And with that, though, data from the FDA, from the USDA, other food safety agencies around the world will tell you that our primary concern with respect to impact on public health remains very much with pathogenic microorganisms, foreign bodies, allergens, and chemical contaminants, either naturally or intentionally added. And we're going to look at a couple of examples of those and then kind of talk about, again, what we're doing relative to that. So first and foremost, the top of everything we do is pathogens and microbiology control, whether it be Salmonella, whether it be Listeria, whether it be E. coli, Shiga-toxic E. coli, or some of his other cousins and partners that cause disease. We continue in the food industry to see outbreaks that result in illnesses, result in hospitalizations, and result in deaths due to inadequate pathogen control or management year after year. This is something that is very, very important to the food industry, certainly very important to Nestle, and navigating how we manage microbiology controls both upstream and in our factories is a really important set of objectives for us. Remaining out of some of the public eye is always the objective, huh? Secondly, foreign bodies. Now, perhaps foreign bodies are less impactful from a statistical standpoint in terms of, but they do represent their fair share of recalls, and they carry an equal weight in terms of potential negative consumer outcomes. Things like choking, things like lacerations in the mouth, things like broken teeth and chipped teeth, and that, as well as foreign bodies oftentimes elicit a much more heightened emotional response from consumers. I'm sure you all have experienced from time to time something, whether it be in a restaurant and you've got a hair in your food or something of this nature. I remember when I was young, we were in a restaurant, I had a salad, and I actually got a big packing staple inside the salad, and that could have done some harm. That was in a restaurant. And so foreign bodies are a really important element of our food safety management system and food safety controls. And again, I can't emphasize enough, foreign bodies do elicit a really heightened consumer response. So therefore their element, or their inclusion in our program is certainly very important. Food allergens, another category of risk and risk hazards that we look into, affecting a smaller portion of the population, but obviously deadly to consumers that are sensitive. They can be. And I do want to point out a couple of organizations that we work very closely with, the Food Allergy Research and Resource Program, FARP, at the University of Nebraska, as well as FAIR, Food Allergy Research and Education. Both these are very important partners to Nestle in what we do to manage food allergens and to communicate to consumers about food allergens. Lastly, is the chemical contaminants world. Now, this one is a little bit of a challenge. There's naturally occurring contaminants like heavy metals that could be found in oceans or soils. And then there's, on the right side, I kind of highlight something, economic adulteration, these intentional things. So olive oil is one of those where you have to be very, very careful, because it can be laced with other types of oils, and that economic adulteration aspect is something, particularly when you're sourcing materials on the global market, and you're not necessarily in the backyard of where your vendors or your partners are. It's something you do have to be very, very careful about. I'm reminded of a quote as I was putting this together that it's been attributed to Mark Twain, and it's, I suppose, a bit of controversy that he actually said it, but even so, I like it quite a bit, because it represents a bit the world that we live in today, and it's a world where anyone with a keyboard has a seemingly credible voice. Today is in kind of what's been going on the last 18 months to 2 years has even grown that further. And a world where I hear this phrase, "I've done my research," somehow puts a homeopathic natural kind of blogger in the same level as academic researchers and academic institutions. So it's an interesting time that we have in negotiating through the world of kind of what folks think they know, that really may not be so, and that is in this world of chemical contaminants, these are issues here that of public concern that we wouldn't normally consider as significant food safety issues. A lot of scientifically baseless scare tactics and things of that nature that are out in the world when it comes to oftentimes perfectly nutritious and safe food. But in any case, as a food manufacturer, you have to treat these types of issues as genuine food safety concerns, because undoubtedly this is how the consumers are perceiving them. And speaking of perception, it's that perception that becomes a really challenging space to navigate. Let me check on how we're doing on time. Got a little timer here. Okay, perfect. A place where objective evidence even has varying interpretation of risk. And I've kind of made up a graphic here where we're just talking about some value that's measured in part per million. This happens in the chemical contaminants space, but scientific result of a part per million of a contaminant, it may have a regulatory limit that is very reasonable. And this is based on toxicological studies and generally relating to maybe chronic conditions and prolonged exposure in chemical contaminants. There may be a food safety level, a true food safety level that's related to acute exposure that's quite a bit higher. But as well, there is an expectation from consumers that harmful chemicals in quote, are not present in our food at all. And so here you kind of end up seeing where, as a food manufacturer, kind of navigating that consumer perception, the regulatory space, different from what the food safety space may be saying to you is an interesting challenge. So as a food safety professional, this is a graphic that I found a couple of years ago floating around on the internet, and I liked it quite a bit. And we talk about risk and risk management and risk tendency within Nestle quite a bit. But as a food safety professional, and as a food safety professional and working for a global manufacturer where we are globally sourcing materials and even sending products out of the U.S. or bringing them into U.S. from Nestle partner markets, I find myself often having an inner dialogue on my own risk tendency. Where am I comfortable acting in any given situation? And I do float around on this chart, depending on the circumstances, depending on what that issue is and how it is looking from a consumer point of view or from a regulatory point of view. The bulk of what I'm talking about here is really focused on food safety. However, as a risk manager and as a risk manager in an organization that is touching the public, the same conversation is also intertwined with regulatory risk, something we try to protect very firmly. Media risk. Everybody's aware of how quickly information travels nowadays, unlike it did 20 years ago and 30 years ago. Consumer perception and trust risk, which I've spoke about. There's legal risk, which can be very challenging to deal with and certainly very expensive. And finally, financial risk. I say finally, but all of those, once I've kind of got past the food safety risk conversation, the rest of these are all a bit on equal footing in terms of what direction are we going, what are we doing, what action we're doing, what mitigation or remediation activities are we doing. And so I'll highlight those again: food safety risk, regulatory risk, media risk, consumer trust risk, legal risk, and financial risk. All really very important. And you may find yourself in different places on this. Certainly we want to be risk adverse to the food safety risks. On the financial risk side, depending on what it is we're trying to do, we may be more on the right side and be in a risk-seeking position. But really understanding your own risk tendencies as you're getting into certain situations is important. So now that we've reminded ourselves of the scary things that we deal with on a daily basis, or we're at war with as a food manufacturer, we're going to spend a bit of moment on talking about mitigation strategies and those things that we do where a risk-based assessment of impact and probability kind of guides us to the specifics or appropriate controls. So there's some different graphics over here that I find very interesting. The traditional HACCP-based risk assessment, for those that HACCP is that thing up in the middle, hazard analysis and critical control points. Many of you probably have heard of that. It's still our most important foundational food safety activity, but it doesn't always make for a convincing strategy discussion with our business and commercial colleagues. HACCP tends to be a very technical deep dive into things, so we have We have to be able to have different conversations with different stakeholders on what we're trying to achieve and make that technical jargon laden with food safety deep terms and all the voodoo and witchcraft that we play around with, make it more appetizing for the business colleagues. So the question is, how do we move beyond kind of a QC mindset of years gone by, many years ago, and into a place where food safety and quality are not a support function, but really a business partner. We have this bubble graphic here that we use within Nestle quite a bit, and it's really very simple, and we didn't make this up. It's called a business triangle. It goes by a few different terms, and you might see it if you're in the IT, IS world, or the insurance world, or some other industries. But it's as simple as it is. It's really very helpful to talk about the way risks are managed is by growing in some way 1, 2, or 3 of these bubbles. Using this this model here helps us navigate food safety conversations, food safety risk out of the very deep technical language that we sometimes find ourselves in. And I'm going to explore each of these a little bit to help you understand how and why we use it. We'll start with the process bubble. And one of the most important processes that we have in food manufacturing is supply chain preventive controls. When considering this process, how do we mature the process so we're more effective and more efficient in delivering safe and consistent materials to our factory? Well, oftentimes it lies in re-engineering the process to focus more on a performance improvement rather than a kind of a traditional test and audit model. But this supply chain preventive control is critically important in certainly the simplicity of that we need to have materials coming into the factories that are fit for purpose. And it's hard to make up for shortcomings in that area if we're not really paying attention there. Going a bit a layer deeper, I guess, in the raw material supply chain, we've got supplier certification. Some of you may have heard of GFSI, the Global Food Safety Initiative, and this is a bunch of a series of industry benchmarks, ISO, SGS, BRC, to name a few. There's a bunch of other ones. You see them in the upper right-hand side there, these certification programs that are part of benchmarked against the GFSI standards. Within Nestle, we now have 95% I'm talking about on a global level, 95% of our supplier base on a GFSI recognized standard. Within the US, it's 100%. And this approach allows us to optimize resources that were traditionally allocated to 500 or more audits around the country and certainly on a global level per year, to refocus on building supplier capability, partnering with suppliers on performance enhancement, and just massively improving manufacturing and performance by making sure that the materials we're getting in are ready and fit for purpose. The last example around process is this concept of quality and food safety by design. And this can have such a positive outcome on food safety, with our businesses needing more speed in new product development and industrialization, streamlining quality by design to include risk assessments upfront and early, allows us to target our attention with precision on the types of risks that we want to assess, while speeding up the efficiency of the product development model overall. So this concept of quality and food safety by design has been really instrumental in, and I got up top this concept idea to launch mindset, where moving through those aspects very quickly and in a less traditional sense, being very targeted up front on what risks we're trying to manage through, and then building those processes later on into the factories as we go to industrialization. So shifting gear for a moment to the technology bubble, arguably the more exciting bubble, as it contains a bunch of, as we say, bright, shiny new toys. And the trick is to find those pieces of technology that really, truly are impacting food safety. It's a place you have to be a little careful with. When you open food industry magazines, you see page after page after page of new and interesting things that are claiming they can make your life easier instantaneously. First and foremost, obvious example in this space is in supply chain, where we're working towards a world where raw materials come from, and having absolute transparency to all. So this is this blockchain technology. This transparency helps our consumers feel they can trust the food, so it does impact that consumer trust element that I spoke of before. All sorts of things are being evaluated from this perspective. Blockchain platforms like GreenFence and satellite imagery and all sorts of internet and sensors and gadgets are all partly in play here, but it's really a very fast growing and interesting area. As a company that is quite large and global, we are careful with investments like this. It's very costly for us to put things like this across our entire enterprise. So we do need to know that they work. So there is a lot of work that goes into in the background to really test these types of new technologies before we start to go live with them. Looking in manufacturing space, here are similar opportunities with a connected device, robots and sensors and other types of cool things. But where we're seeing the most impact for Nestle at the moment is revisiting older technologies that may have been dismissed in the past. Using X-rays to hunt for foreign materials, for example. We've installed X-rays across all of our market. We've experimented with X-rays to complement metal detectors in factories with kind of so-so results, I guess. But with the latest generation of X-rays, we find now just how much stuff is around in certain materials, vegetables, and things of that nature, field debris and things. So it's a really interesting area where we've had a lot of discoveries. Complementing X-rays in the factory space are now vision systems. So picture there a little bit in the middle, driven by asset intensity, artificial intelligence, which not only detects foreign bodies, but also lets you know things like, do you have the right number of pepperonis on your pizza, or other things related to product or product quality, or what consumer expectations are. Another area of technology that's really important, and the last one that I'll cover today, is analytical capability. Beyond the dramatic improvements in analytical sensitivity and speed of analysis, which obviously assist greatly in identifying risks for us and helping us manage them that were previously hidden from view. But we also have some really excellent technologies that are new, focused down on the bottom now, new in terms of widespread application, and I'm speaking specifically about whole genome sequencing. Within Nestle, we invested really early in whole genome sequencing. We've had it for a lot of years from now. I think now there's a lot of, well, not a lot, but many other companies that have this internal capability, but early on we were one of the few. And as a former Salmonella and Listeria hunter in previous times of my career, this really brings to bear a different degree of power as an investigatory tool for us. The future with linking that into, again, artificial intelligence and big data management is really going to be a fun time and a rapidly changing time. On the people side, when I flash the three bubble concept up, that one is always the one that gets attention. Okay, people like to play in technology, but technology is expensive. People like to play in process, but process requires diligence, and it does require complexity when you start to lock down how you do things. It's necessary, but here we have people, and people, as everybody says, they're both the most important part of the food manufacturing company, but from a food safety perspective, this can be your weakest link. Once you have technology installed and you've done reliability, then you don't expect it to, you have maintenance and you have all the things that come along with it, but basically you expect it to perform. But with people, you do have to pay close attention. And that's why it's really important to ensure all the people across our value stream understand their role in food safety and are treated and supported accordingly. And that's where culture comes into play. So in the next couple slides, we'll talk about that a little bit, and within Nestle. We have this concept called autonomous operators, which connects the technology bubble and the people bubble together, kind of as those three bubbles look like a Venn diagram to some degree. And it's very amazing when you start to put these tools, make them available to frontline employees, what happens. These tools, softwares, hardwares, iPads, are becoming more and more intuitive and easy to use. There was a time period where if you had an older community in the factories and you had computer systems, that it was very, very challenging to get folks to embrace and use those. But over time, that's become different, and the technology has become really very user-friendly. And with that, we no longer have to spend hours and hours with employees in training rooms doing long and kind of traditional style training, because we've seen a convergence of how we train and skill sets come out of this. Hand folks an iPad or an iPhone, which they're used to using anyway, they have at home. And if you have the right kind of software and applications on it, then almost immediately folks are intuitively starting to know what it is they need to do and starting to own processes a lot more than maybe what we saw in the past. Moving into culture, you have to start at the top. Leadership has to set the tone of behavior and needs to communicate strongly support for food safety and as they say, walk the talk. We're very fortunate in Nestle to work for a company where this is evident. Some of our leaders are over on the right side, and some quotes that are used in some internal communications. I've been in many places over the years. As I said, 32 years with Nestle. We have a lot of partners and contract manufacturers and suppliers where an absence of leadership is what you feel. And certainly if you don't set the right example and you don't communicate with employees, then you suffer in places that are really important and really challenging to navigate out of. And it's been our observation that companies that have a strong food safety culture oftentimes have learned the hard way. And as a company that's 153 years old now, I think it is, with Nestle, we're not any different. We've had certainly ups and downs, and developing and sustaining a strong food safety culture. It's not by accident. It's the result of a very deliberate strategy to do so. On screen are a couple of examples of references to help build that type of culture. I personally, on the right side, I personally took a lot out of that book from Frank Yiannis, who's with the FDA now, and he wrote that many years ago. But that book has been very instrumental in shaping my own views on influencing food safety culture within the Nestle organization. Create opportunities for employees to have and share experience related to food safety, and you'll really see this grow in an exponential way. It's rather simple but rather powerful model. All right. So with mindset and culture also, anchoring back here, sorry, I got some things out of order here. I put on the right side a little bit. It's really important to be able to measure these aspects that you're working on. And from a risk manager standpoint, you do want to understand that the culture and the decisions taken throughout the organization are in the right interests of food safety. The benchmark on the right side was from several years ago, and we have had a lot of efforts around culture, and I'm happy to say that today, at the latest benchmark, Nestle is in the top quintile. That's 20%, so hitting in that top part. And again, that's not by it's not by accident. It's through a lot of design of what we do internally around cultural growth. So lastly, anchoring back to the leadership slide and the importance of treating employees, it's important to remember that we're all people, we're all humans, and we do like clarity around our responsibilities, the boundaries we work, and folks do respond to understanding why things are important. I hear a lot of folks, I hear it internally, I also hear it externally when I'm interacting with other companies, is talking about and teaching the why behind the what. And from a food safety culture and a people aspect, this is really, really important. Again, it goes against the traditional ways of training and education, which was very much tell what to do and how to do it, and then set the expectation. It's from an adult learning perspective, understanding why is a really important element of what we do. So a couple of key messages here, and then we can maybe take some questions. That while the risks and hazards that we deal with are traditional, these haven't changed. Foreign body, microbiology, chemical contaminants, allergens. They're coming in a lot of different forms, and in kind of a global area, and how things have changed over the years. Anticipating and understanding of these risks is really very key. That early risk assessment that I mentioned in quality by design, partnering with vendors, partnering with suppliers, partnering with other markets for Nestle, that is around the world, and understanding what are the issues in that part of the world and what's driving them is super important. Building consumer trust, keeping consumer trust are critical for the health of a company. Building it is the easy part. Keeping it is the hard part. It erodes very rapidly. And finally, I emphasize people kind of in that how we manage and mitigate risks within the organization by really investing in folks. And it's important that they have a voice, and important that we listen to them, and that we take them all along the journey that we're doing. We talk a lot within Nestle on change management, and that's an aspect that is very important to bring the folks along with as well, because there's lots of good ideas and great ideas, and there's lots of understanding of better ways to do things once you tap into that great marketplace of folks throughout the factories and throughout the organization and give them a voice. But they have to know that their voice is being recognized, and they have to know that they're an important part of the organization's growth. So with that, that concludes the content that I wanted to go over, and I thank you all for listening. Cindy, I'll turn it over to you for a moment if there's any questions that have popped up in the chat, anything we need to roll back to and talk about further, or certainly if there's a way for folks to ask questions, then we can open it up there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. There are no questions in the chat box, but everyone, please feel free to show your faces and unmute yourself and ask questions and engage in conversation.
David, I have a question. This is Armand.
Yes, sir.
We hear a lot in the news these days about stresses throughout the supply chain.
Yeah.
In what ways is Nestle considering how to compensate for weak points and I guess what you call obstacles in the supply chain as it relates to food safety.
Yeah, that is something that's really caught the news lately. You all have seen, I'm sure, pictures and video of hundreds and thousands of ships out in the ocean, and we've been affected by this. A big part of, well, a part of, I wouldn't say it's a big part of, but a part of our business in the U.S. is bringing, first of all, bringing product from other markets into the U.S. for sale. Ethnic products from all over the world that are appreciated here in the U.S. and also sending things out. But more importantly, the material supply chain has been affected, and gosh, how are we combating this? Well, one of the things, of course, we have the advantage of being a large company with a lot of leverage, and oftentimes we're running ahead on what we're expecting to do, and we have a lot of investment already in organizations that move and transport materials. We have a big supply chain group. They're connected into the global supply chain group, and it's really a matter of staying really on top of and anticipating problems, looking for domestic sources, looking for where we anticipate problems to be. One of the, quite honestly, we're all faced with looking at the opposite end of the value chain as we see. We're all going to be faced with getting product to market and bare shelves, and that's currently, we own a lot of our own trucking, but like a lot of industries, getting folks to drive those trucks is becoming a bit of a problem. So as a large company, we can absorb incenting to get folks into positions and getting product into places. We're looking at how to have quicker turnaround on product release, so that when we have available transport, we can get it where we need to go immediately. But it's like anything else, is you're really looking into where are those alternate avenues that you may have available to you, and trying to take advantage of each of it every time. But from a risk standpoint, that does come with a certain amount of, risk acceptance in some different avenues and speed to market pathways that you may not be normally using. And it is a big challenge. I'm not sure that we've fully been able to crack that nut yet, but we're in the same bucket with a whole lot of our other industry partners.
Bizad, did you want to ask your question, or do you want me to ask on your behalf?
If they didn't want to speak up, they got to speak up to tell you if they want you to answer, huh?
Right.
Question, huh?
Okay, so Bizad said, great presentation. 2 questions for you, David. 1, could you talk a little about the tools, teams that you, as a safety director of a giant company like Nestle, have at your disposal to ensure food safety? Second question, what are the chain of events that happen or should happen after a product is implicated in a disease outbreak, especially with respect to PR, to migrate the damage to the brand?
That one is a big question there. Okay. So, and I might have misunderstood. Look, can you read the first question again, please?
Sure. Could you talk a little bit about the tools/teams that you, as a safety director of a giant company, have at your disposal to ensure food safety?
Got it. Okay. I thought you said teams, but I wasn't sure. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'll talk about, I'm going to lean on the people side of this for a moment, then we'll talk about some tools. I have a big group. The food safety group for Nestle USA is composed of 3 different groups of people. One group is industrial hygiene, and those folks are tasked with working with the factories and working with our partners that might be external to Nestle, the contract manufacturers and suppliers, as well as partners in the subject matter, sanitation partners, pest management partners, that type of thing, with things that you would expect to be in industrial hygiene. Those are typically what we refer to as prerequisite programs: food safety systems, cleaning, pest management, traceability, allergen management, foreign body controls, foreign body device detection, all these types of things. I have a second group, which is a compliance team. And the compliance team, while they're embedded in the food safety group, really go outside, because compliance is both an internal term and an external term. In compliance, compliance for Nestle is really three elements. It's internal compliance to standards, it's external compliance to industry standards, and it's external compliance to regulatory requirements and standards. And as we're exporting materials from the US, even regulatory requirements can get fairly complex, because I might be exporting to Brazil and to Mexico and to Canada and to Europe and to Asia and to New Zealand and all sorts of stuff. So the regulatory landscape can be quite complicated. So there's a group of folks different from our regulatory team, which is outside the quality management group. They're really, my compliance group is really about, what is the standard? Are we meeting the standard? How do we prove that we're meeting the standard? And they work quite a bit with the factories, and again with our partner companies, on verification programs, audits and assessments, and they're really a quite busy group. And then the third group within my team is thermal processing and factory systems. And so we have thermal process authorities within there. As you can imagine, we have a lot of processes that are where we're cooking things, or we're transforming through heat or some other application to reduce microbiology, to convert it from a not ready to eat material to a ready to eat material, or reducing the microbiology or changing the microbiology in some way so that it is positioned for whatever the product is that we're making. And those guys and girls are throughout the market, and again working with internal stakeholders at the factory level, but also in this case working with our friends in FDA and USDA and some of our industry partners as well. A few of them quite active within IFISH and a group called IFTIPS, which is a Thermal Processing Authority organization. So that's my team. Now within quality management, we also have a specific supplier management team that we work very closely with. We kind of set some of the standards that they work against in terms of the risk management and contaminant management programs, but they're really focused as the face to our vendors. And there's also a contract manufacturing team within quality management that does the same at the other end of the value chain. And then finally, within quality management are our category quality management groups, and we are very close to them as well, again, for the standards on food safety. I do have somebody in my industrial hygiene group that is a hygienic design expert, and they interface with the engineering and maintenance community. Engineering and maintenance owns equipment and owns the operation of equipment, but hygienic design is I don't know that I could emphasize enough the importance of hygienic design and cleanability of equipment on an industrial setting. And so we have a lot of influence into the engineering community as well on what we do and how, when we're purchasing new equipment, when we're improving equipment, when we're doing capital projects, building new lines, building new factories, anything that we might be spending money on there. As far as tools go, there's a lot of digital tools that are starting to come around. And I say starting, that's from a Nestle perspective. These things have been around a long time, but really I'd say the what's in my immediate future is how to bring many data streams together and interpret those in a way so that we can enable early management and not end up in the situation that is the second part of your question of when you have a product that's in trouble. So, you know, almost like using statistical process control, but on a grander level with data streams that might include vibration analysis of equipment, for understanding if you're about to have a foreign body event. High frequency testing of production lines for microbiology indicators. And when I say high frequency testing, I mean sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different sites along the line, maybe tested every half hour, every hour, every 2 hours, every 3 hours, and generating a lot of SPC data that gives you an insight into the, I call it the hygienic stability. How wide is my bell curve? But even microbiology is a delayed, is a lagging indicator. So using other indicators that are real time. ATP has been around forever, but I think the importance is linking these things together. My ATP result, my chemical concentrations, my line speeds, my factory environmental temperature and humidity. And that's where I think we're really starting to grow in what's available from a artificial intelligence standpoint and overlaying those data streams. I got a whole lot of people in my group that to feed this information, they're very hungry for how do we use this stuff. So that's, I think, kind of where a lot of it comes together. The second question, chain of events after product is implicated in some sort of, I guess, public health or otherwise event. Unfortunately, as a big company, we have a couple of experiences here. Crisis management is an interesting way to go. Now, within Nestle, we're afforded the opportunity of having a large group of people that can come together very quickly and manage through situations. And really, it's about having this organized in a way where when you have to, or when you're faced with that kind of problem, that you can move through those processes with a great deal of ease and professionalism, and not necessarily get bogged down in the procedures of it. What's really tantamount and critically important here is that if you have an understanding that something has the potential to negatively impact public health, the swiftness that you act and the depth and breadth that you go in order to manage that and prevent any kind of issues, it can't be underestimated. So in terms of chain of events at a high level, the first thing that we do within Nestle is to assemble that group of people that are part of our incident management or crisis management. And you're going to have representation from legal, you're going to have representation from public relations, you're going to have representation from the business, from supply chain and logistics, from quality and maybe safety and maybe engineering, depending on what it is. But generally, we're having a lot of cross-functional group that need to come together at a level where you can take decisions fast and execute against those decisions rapidly with laser focus. So if you don't have the right level in the organization, that becomes a problem. So these are usually I'm a director, right? So generally I'm one of the lower levels that are in this incident management, because it's generally vice presidents and presidents that would be in this organization, in this grouping that's coming together in order to control and remediate whatever the situation is. And then from there, in terms of chain of events, everybody's working together, but kind of independently. We're working on what types of communications might need to be made to regulatory agencies, to partners like FAIR, if it's an allergen issue, to our partners, our customer partners, to the public, internal to the employees. These are all things that a group would need to consider, because it becomes difficult to manage through things if you've got a lot of rogue communications. A group that touches in with our regulatory group, a group that is doing You have to know, this is where blockchain, I think, is going to have an enormous impact, is being able to trace forward and backward very quickly and know where things have gone that might be potentially wrapped up in an issue. So I'm not sure that I answered your question with a lot of specificity, Bazad, but from a chain of events standpoint, it all starts with assembling a group that is high enough in the organization that they can understand the situation and also take decisions that can be executed against very rapidly.
We have a question from Wei Zhang.
Hi, David. This is Wei Zhang. Always enjoy your talk. I have just a couple of quick questions. I'm looking at your company's website. You guys have a plant-based portfolio. You have quite a number of kind of plant-based products like chocolate or plant-based tuna or the gourmet sensational burger and stuff like that. So are these plant-based dairy or meat products considered to be a novel food products from your company? And what are the challenges in terms of the food safety for this type of products?
Yeah, we do consider them to be a novel area of work. Now, on one level, plant-based, the idea of things being plant-based is not so new, right? There's no novelty there, I suppose. There's lots of things that are there, but when you look at chocolates and things, there start to become maybe in other products things of animal derivative that are in there that you do need to manage through. The novel piece of this is in a couple areas where, first of all, you're in some cases you're trying to mimic. You mentioned a plant-based tuna, right? And everybody's probably seen the plant-based burgers and plant-based chicken, imitation chicken, and these kind of things. So folks that are buying a veggie burger, for example, and these have been around for a long time, are really not, at least historically, they were buying those because they wanted something that wasn't animal-based, but they weren't necessarily, maybe they were and they just couldn't find it, I don't know, but I guess these weren't designed to mimic the animal product. And that's a different space today, which I find really intriguing. The novel piece of this then is, how are we creating something that mimics as close as possible a animal-based product, but is made with all plant-based materials and origin and derivatives. And that's where it becomes very interesting. So you're using extracts from beets, which seems very elementary, huh? But somehow if you're making a plant-based burger, you need to make it look red, and you need to make it perform like a regular burger. Where some of the risk pieces come in is we're looking at, as a company, and we have a group in Switzerland that is absolutely just focused on plant-based from a research and R&D center that is focused on plant-based novel ingredients and plant-based technologies. But as you start to tap into protein sources from non-animal sources, and I say non-animal sources, not plant-based sources, because there's a whole bunch, and I'm not sure, I don't think this would be considered plant-based, but let's not forget there's a whole bunch of insect consumption that takes place in the world, and that's a very important protein source for folks. But when you're looking at non-animal protein sources and things that people are not traditionally eating a lot of, then there are some new risks, chemical contaminant risks, that come into picture that you really need to be on top of. And I'll use one as an example. We use pea protein, like the green pea protein in some of our products. Well, some of you may know, but a lot of you may not know that pea is in the same family as peanut, and folks that are peanut allergenic may have a reaction to pea protein. So this is something that you really need to investigate and understand going in to this, in order to what are we going to do? How am I going to manage it? I have to manage it. I have to manage cross contact the same way I would manage peanut protein if I had it on shared equipment, because I can't put people at risk unknowingly without them having the communications that we would normally put on something that contains peanut or maybe is on shared equipment. We did some investigation into fava bean. Well, fava bean has a chemical in it that can elicit a response in folks. They call it favism, strangely enough. And there's a small percent of the population that is sensitive to a chemical within fava beans. And because fava bean isn't a huge part of the diet in the United States, folks won't know that they're sensitive to this chemical, or have this it's not a disease, I guess, a sensitivity called favism. And therefore, there's a risk that comes along with us using that type of material. And how do we navigate through that? We have a lot of toxicologists in the company. We have a lot of folks that are in risk and risk management and risk understanding. We've got a whole R&D group. And so, yeah, treading very carefully through the plant-based arena is it's a place that we're still growing in. And how do you balance satisfying what customers want without them really knowing on the technical underbelly what they're asking for may not be what they really want. But how do you navigate that? Then also at the same time being a responsible organization and doing the due diligence, but trying to be an organization also that is producing product that folks want, and giving folks the things that they're asking for. The plant-based portfolio is growing very quickly. We've got some really interesting products in there. I haven't tried the tuna one. I have tried the plant-based chicken. It's like pulled chicken. It kind of looks like that, and it's really very excellent. If y'all see it out there, try it. But it's a pretty cool and interesting space.
Did that add additional task or burden to you as a food safety director in terms of the microbial safety of those plant-based foods, or spoilage or shelf life, things like that?
Yeah, it does, in that it adds a burden of there's a big unknown that comes along with it, right? So if there's other people from other companies, I'm not sure, but us in our position, we don't get the opportunity to say, well, I don't really know much about that, so therefore we can't do it. So it's important. Like I interact with the folks at iFish. I interact with the folks at University of Georgia Center for Food Safety, and other organizations that we're either a member of or that we just are intertwined with. I have professional connections throughout the food industry, and I found in the food safety, it's interesting because we always say food safety is non-negotiable, and food safety is not a competitive advantage. And if you're in the food industry, you really see this, right? I have no problems with any of my food safety peers from other companies picking up the phone and calling me, or sending me an email and saying, hey, we're doing XYZ and wondering if you're doing the same thing, and what do you think about it? And us being very collaborative in that nature, because at the end of the day, if the food industry, if any member of the food industry fails, then we all, that consumer trust that I've got here on this slide here, we're all stewards of food safety and of consumer trust, and it's important that I'm working with my other industry peers on these types of things. But I don't get to say, well, I can't do this other thing anymore because I got to work on plant-based. I have to absorb it and figure it out.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions, anybody?
How do I get rid of the presentation mode? There we go. Stop sharing. Put myself back on the screen. There we go.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. I'd like to thank you once again, David. It was an excellent presentation. Thank you for your time.
I can make one comment, also appreciating your time, David. But for those that would like to have further engagement with David, he's on the Chicago Section IFT seminar session on the Suppliers Day. He's participating with myself and others on the subject of the impact of digital technologies on food manufacturing, food safety, and cybersecurity. So that is at Chicago Section IFT. It's a seminar mid to late morning on November 3rd at the Rosemont Convention Center. So if you want to have a chance to meet David in person, come on out and you can find us there. I'm co-moderating that session with David.
Looking forward to that as well. Thank you for
Right.
that invite. Yep, and also for folks on the call, I mean, certainly I'm open. I didn't share it on here, but Cindy and Armand both have my email address. If anybody has any other questions or just wants to talk about something, then certainly you could both of you please forward them on to me. They can y'all can. I'm happy to interact and talk through anything that anybody's interested in.
Great, thank
Great.
you.
Thank you again,
All right.
David.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.